Bible in a Year, Day 166. Readings from the Holy Bible, the first book of Kings, chapters 15 and 16, the second book of Chronicles, chapters 17 and 18, Song of Songs, chapter 5, first book of Kings, chapter 15. Reign of Abijam. In the 18th year of King Jeroboam, son of Nebat, Abijam became king of Judah. He reigned 3 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Maacah, daughter of Abishalom. He followed all the sins his father had committed before him, and his heart was not entirely with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. Yet for David's sake the Lord his God gave him a holding in Jerusalem, raising up his son after him and permitting Jerusalem to endure. Because David had done what was right in the sight of the Lord and did not disobey any of his commands as long as he lived, except in the case of Uriah the Hittite. There was war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam all their days. The rest of the acts of Abijam with all that he did are recorded in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah. There was war between Abijam and Jeroboam. Abijam rested with his ancestors. They buried him in the city of David, and his son Asa succeeded him as king. Reign of Asa. In the 20th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Asa, king of Judah, became king. He reigned 41 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Maacah, daughter of Abishalom. Asa did what was right in the sight of the Lord, like David his father, banishing the pagan priests from the land and removing all the idols his ancestors had made. He also deposed his grandmother Maacah from her position as queen mother because she had made an outrageous object for Asherah. Asa cut down this object and burned it in the Wadi Kidron. The high places did not disappear, yet Asa's heart was entirely with the Lord as long as he lived. He brought into the house of the Lord his fathers and his own votive offerings of silver and gold and various vessels. There was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, all their days. Baasha, king of Israel, attacked Judah and fortified Ramah to blockade Asa, king of Judah. Asa then took all the silver and gold remaining in the treasuries of the house of the Lord and the house of the king, entrusting them to his ministers. King Asa sent them to Ben-Hadad, son of Tabrimon, son of Hezion, king of Aram, who ruled in Damascus. He said, "There is a treaty between you and me as there was between your father and my father. I am sending you a present of silver and gold. Go break your treaty with Baasha, king of Israel, that he may withdraw from me." Ben-Hadad agreed with King Asa and sent the leaders of his troops against the cities of Israel. They attacked Ijon, Dan, Abel, Beth Makkah, and all Shinnereth, besides all the land of Naphtali. When Baasha heard of it, he left off fortifying Ramah and stayed in Tirzah. Then King Asa summoned all Judah without exception, and they carried away the stones and beams with which Baasha was fortifying Ramah. With them King Asa built Geba of Benjamin and Mizpah. All the rest of the acts of Asa, with all his valor and all that he did, and the cities he built, are recorded in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah. But in his old age Asa had an infirmity in his feet. Asa rested with his ancestors. He was buried with his ancestors in the city of David. His father and his son Jehoshaphat succeeded him as king. Reign of King Nadab, son of Jeroboam, became king of Israel in the second year of Asa, king of Judah. For 2 years he reigned over Israel. He did what was evil in the Lord's sight, walking in the way of his father and the sin he had caused Israel to commit. Baasha, son of Ahijah of the house of Issachar, plotted against him and struck him down at Gibbethon of the Philistines, which Nadab and all Israel were besieging. Baasha killed him in the third year of Asa, king of Judah, and succeeded him as king. Once he was king, he killed the entire house of Jeroboam, not leaving a single soul, but destroying Jeroboam utterly, according to the word of the Lord spoken through his servant Ahijah the Shilonite. Because of the sins Jeroboam committed and caused Israel to commit, by which he provoked the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger. The rest of the acts of Nadab, with all that he did, are recorded in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. There was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, all their days. Reign of Baasha. In the third year of Asa, king of Judah, Baasha, son of Ahijah, became king of all Israel in Tirzah for 24 years. He did what was evil in the Lord's sight, walking in the way of Jeroboam, and the sin he had caused Israel to commit. Chapter 16. The word of the Lord came to Jehu, son of Hanani, against Baasha. Inasmuch as I exalted you from the dust and made you ruler of my people Israel, but you have walked in the way of Jeroboam and have caused my people Israel to sin, provoking me to anger by their sins, I will burn up what is left of Baasha and his house. I will make your house like that of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, one of Baasha's line who dies in the city. Dogs will devour, one who dies in the field, the birds of the sky will devour. The rest of the acts of Baasha, what he did and his valor, are recorded in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. Baasha rested with his ancestors. He was buried in Tirzah, and his son Elah succeeded him as king. Through the prophet Jehu, son of Hanani, the word of the Lord came against Baasha and his house, because of all the evil Baasha did in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger by his deeds, so that he became like the house of Jeroboam, and because of what he destroyed. Reign of Elah. In the 26th year of Asa, king of Judah, Elah, son of Baasha, became king of Israel in Tirzah for 2 years. His servant Zimri, commander of half his chariots, plotted against him. As he was in Tirzah, drinking to excess in the house of Arza, master of his palace in Tirzah, Zimri entered. He struck and killed him in the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, and succeeded him as king. Once he was king, seated on the throne, he killed the whole house of Baasha, not sparing a single male relative or friend of his. Zimri destroyed the entire house of Baasha according to the word the Lord spoke against Baasha through Jehu the prophet. Because of all the sins which Baasha and his son Elah committed and caused Israel to commit, provoking the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger by their idols. The rest of the acts of Elah, with all that he did, are recorded in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. Reign of Zimri. In the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, Zimri became king for 7 days in Tirzah. The army was encamped at Gibbethon of the Philistines. When they heard Zimri has formed a conspiracy and has killed the king, so that day in the camp all Israel made Omri commander of the army, king of Israel. Omri and all Israel with him marched up from Gibbethon and besieged Tirzah. When Zimri saw that the city was captured, he entered the citadel of the king's house and burned it down over him. He died. Because of the sins he had committed, doing what was evil in the Lord's sight by walking in the way of Jeroboam, and the sin he had caused Israel to commit. The rest of the acts of Zimri, with the conspiracy he carried out, are recorded in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. Civil war. At that time, the people of Israel were divided into half following Tibni, son of Ginath, to make him king, and half for Omri. The partisans of Omri prevailed over those of Tibni, son of Ginath. Tibni died, and Omri became king. Reign of Omri. In the 31st year of Asa, king of Judah, Omri became king of Israel for 12 years. The first 6 of them he reigned in Tirzah. He then bought the mountain of Samaria from Shemer for 2 silver talents, and built upon the mountain the city he named Samaria after Shemer, the former owner. But Omri did what was evil in the Lord's sight more than any of his predecessors. In every way he imitated the sinful conduct of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, and the sin he had caused Israel to commit, thus provoking the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger by their idols. The rest of the acts of Omri, what he did and his valor, are recorded in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. Omri rested with his ancestors. He was buried in Samaria, and Ahab his son succeeded him as king. Reign of Ahab. Ahab, son of Omri, became king of Israel in the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah. Ahab, son of Omri, reigned over Israel in Samaria for 22 years. Ahab, son of Omri, did what was evil in the Lord's sight more than any of his predecessors. It was not enough for him to follow the sins of Jeroboam, son of Naboth. He even married Jezebel, daughter of Ithbal, king of the Sidonians, and began to serve Baal and worship him. Ahab set up an altar to Baal in the house of Baal which he built in Samaria, and also made an Asherah. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than any of the kings of Israel before him. During his reign, Hiel from Bethel rebuilt Jericho at the cost of Abiram, his firstborn son. He laid the foundation, and at the cost of Shegub, his youngest son, he set up the gates according to the word of the Lord spoken through Joshua, son of Nun. Second Book of Chronicles, chapter 17. Second Book of Chronicles, chapter 18. Jehoshaphat's alliance with Israel. Jehoshaphat therefore had wealth and glory in abundance, but he became related to Ahab by marriage. After some years, he went down to Ahab at Samaria. Ahab slaughtered numerous sheep and oxen for him and for the people with him, and incited him to go up against Ramoth Gilead. Ahab, king of Israel, asked Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, "Will you come with me to Ramoth Gilead?" He answered, "You and I are as one, and your people and my people as well. We will be with you in the battle." Jehoshaphat also said to the king of Israel, "Seek the word of the Lord at once." Prophets in conflict. The king of Israel assembled the prophets, 400 of them, and asked, "Shall we go to fight against Ramoth Gilead, or shall I refrain?" They said, "Attack, God will give it into the power of the king." But Jehoshaphat said, "Is there no prophet of the Lord ere we might consult?" The king of Israel answered, "There is one man through whom we may consult the Lord, but I hate him, because he prophesies not good but always evil about me. He is Micaiah, son of Imlah." Jehoshaphat said, "Let not the king say that." So the king of Israel called an official and said to him, "Get Micaiah, son of Imlah, at once." The king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, were seated, each on his throne, clothed in their robes of the state, in the square at the entrance of the gate of Samaria, and all the prophets were prophesying before them. Zedekiah, son of Shena, made himself 2 horns of iron and said, "The Lord said, with these you shall go Aram until you have destroyed them." The other prophets prophesied in the same vein, saying, "Attack Ramoth Gilead and conquer. The Lord will give it into the power of the king." Meanwhile, the messenger who had gone to call Micaiah said to him, "Look now, the words of the prophets are as one in speaking good for the king. Let your word be at one with theirs. Speak a good word." Micaiah said, "As the Lord lives, I shall speak whatever my God says." When he came to the king said to him, "Micaiah, shall we go to fight at Ramoth Gilead, or shall I refrain?" He said, "Attack and conquer. They will be delivered into your power." But the king answered him, "How many times must I adjure you to tell me nothing but the truth in the name of the Lord?" So Micaiah said, "I see all Israel scattered on the mountains, like sheep without a shepherd, and the Lord saying, These have no masters. Let each of them go back home in peace." The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "Did I not tell you he does not prophesy good about me, but only evil?" Micaiah continued, "Therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord seated on his throne, with the whole host of heaven standing to his right and to his left. The Lord asked, Who will deceive Ahab, king of Israel, so that he will go up and fall on Ramoth Gilead?" And one said this, another that, until the Spirit came forth and stood before the Lord, saying, "I will deceive him." The Lord asked, "How?" He answered, "I will go forth and become a lying spirit in the mouths of all his prophets." The Lord replied, "You shall succeed in deceiving him. Go forth and do this." So now the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouths of these prophets of yours, but the Lord himself has decreed evil against you. Thereupon Zedekiah, son of Shena, came up and struck Micaiah on the cheek, saying, "Has the Spirit of the Lord then passed from me to speak with you?" Micaiah said, "You shall find out on the day you go into an innermost room to hide." The king of Israel then said, "Seize Micaiah and take him back to Ammon, prefect of the city, and to Joash the king's son, and say, "This is the king's order. Put this man in prison and feed him scanty rations of bread and water until I come back in safety." But Micaiah said, "If ever you return in safety, the Lord has not spoken through me." He also said, "Hear, O peoples, all of you." Ahab's death. The king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, went up to Ramoth Gilead. And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "I will disguise myself and go into battle, but you put on your own robes." So the king of Israel disguised himself, and they entered the battle. In the meantime, the king of Aram had given his chariot commanders the order, "Fight with no one, great or small, except the king of Israel alone." When the chariot commanders saw Jehoshaphat, they thought, "There is the king of Israel," and wheeled to fight him. But Jehoshaphat cried out, and the Lord helped him. God induced them to leave him alone. The chariot commanders, seeing that he was not the king of Israel, turned away from him. But someone drew his bow at random and hit the king of Israel between the joints of his breastplate. He ordered his charioteer, "Rein about me and take me out of the ranks, for I am wounded." The battle grew fierce during the day, and the king of Israel braced himself up in his chariot, facing the Arameans until evening. He died as the sun was setting. Song of Songs, chapter 5. I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. I gather my myrrh with my spices. I eat my honeycomb with my honey. I drink my wine with my milk. Eat, friends, drink deeply, lovers. A fruitless search. I was sleeping, but my heart was awake. The sound of my lover knocking. "Open to me, my sister, my friend, my dove, my perfect one, for my head is wet with dew, my hair with the moisture of the night. I have taken off my robe, and am I then to put it on? I have bathed my feet. Am I then to soil them?" My lover put his hand in through the opening, my innermost being trembled because of him. I rose to open for my lover, my hands dripping myrrh, my fingers flowing myrrh upon the handles of the lock. I opened for my lover, but my lover had turned and gone. At his leaving, my soul sank. I sought him, but I did not find him. I called out after him, but he did not answer me. The watchmen found me as they made their rounds in the city. They beat me, they wounded me, they tore off my mantle, the watchmen of the walls. I adjure you, daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my lover, what shall you tell him? That I am sick with love? The lost lover described. How does your lover differ from any other lover? Most beautiful among women, how does your lover differ from any other, that you adjure us so? My lover is radiant and ruddy, outstanding among thousands. His head is gold, pure gold, his hair like palm fronds, as black as a raven. His eyes are like doves, besides streams of water bathing in milk, sitting by brimming pools. His cheeks are like beds of spices, yielding aromatic scents. His lips are lilies that drip flowing myrrh. His arms are rods of gold, adorned with gems. His loins a work of ivory, covered with sapphires. His legs pillars of alabaster resting on golden pedestals. His appearance like the Lebanon, imposing as the cedars. His mouth is sweetness itself. He is delightful in every way. Such is my lover and such my friend, daughters of Jerusalem. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.